And we're live. Bismillah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Everybody. Might give people a couple of minutes, but for those of you who are on already, we're kicking off the Ask NZF Anything session. So we'll just give people a couple of minutes to jump on before I introduce who we have on the call. And like all of our sessions, if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to ask us either on the Zoom chat window, on Facebook comments. And given this session is a Ask NZF Anything session, we'll do our best to answer any questions that you have. See, we've got few people on Facebook joining. Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Hope everyone's gearing up for 27th night tonight, big night, inshallah. All right, let's get started. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Farooq. I'm part of the NZF team. And today we are hosting a Ask NZF Anything session. Kind of different to the sessions we've had in the past couple of weeks, where they've been around Zakat and calculations and some of the great talks from various people in the community. One of the things we wanted to do as a team was essentially answer any questions that you may have about NZF. And the reason for that is, from day dot, one of the key values that NZF have had is transparency. And creating trust. And we don't necessarily look at NZF as a charity organization per se. We see ourselves as an organization that enables you to fulfill your Zakat obligation. And we can only do that if you have 100% trust in NZF. So that's really what this session is about, is to answer any questions that you may have. I'm joined by the leadership team. So we've got Ismail Davids, who's our CEO. Asif Mullah, who's our Chief Operations Officer, Munir Abdullah, who's our National Manager, and Sister Angela, who's our HR Manager. So what you're going to do today is, you may or may not be aware, we sent out an email. There were social media comms around, people submitting any questions that they may want answered. So we've got a pool of those questions, and we've also got questions that various people in the team have been asked over the last few years, really. And we've grouped them into kind of different categories. I'm going to go around the table and pose these questions to our leadership team. But in the meantime, if you've got other questions, feel free to add into the comments, and we'll see how we can sort of feed that through into the session. So to start with, I'm going to hand off to our brother Ismail, our CEO, so he can set context around why did we start NZF? What problem were we trying to solve in the Australian community? So, Brother Ismail, over to you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah alameen. Welcome, my brothers and sisters, on a Tuesday afternoon and morning in some places. Tonight is the biggest night in Ramadan for those who start on the Friday. It's the 27th night of Ramadan, inshallah. So firstly, we are grateful for Allah for having granted us this blessing and health to be here, another Ramadan, though it was a very different Ramadan. And may Allah accept all your ibadah tonight and for the whole of the month and for the nights coming. In 2013, 7th of July 2013, we established NZF Australia based on the model that was established in 2010 in the UK, United Kingdom. Very successful, and we established in Australia and Canada. What problem were we trying to fix? We were trying to implement the pillar of Zakah in the country that we live in. So up to that point, there was no one actually implementing the pillar of Zakah, so to speak. So we're not another charity, we're a Zakah foundation. So our fundamental goal was to make people understand the responsibilities in relation to the calculation, paying of Zakah, and then distribution of Zakah. But even though we started on the other end of the scale, basically, we saying that we knew, having worked in the dawah for many years prior to that, we've seen a lot of problems in our masjid, in our musallas, where sisters, brothers, homelessness, domestic violence, various social issues. And we knew there was a need and help in Australia for the Muslim community. A lot of the sisters and brothers would go to Salvation Army, to the Red Cross for help, and there was no succinct organization that was helping with this. The parent organization said, we need to establish this in Australia. And in 2013, 7th of July in Ramadan 2013, it was established to help establish the pillar of Zakat in Australia, to help educate people about Zakat, calculate the Zakat, and then distribute Zakat according to the 8 categories as ordained in the Quran.
Jazakallah khair, Brother Ismail. And I think that naturally kind of leads me to the next question that keeps coming up, which is around eligibility. But taking a step back, zakah was a sadaqah, and with zakah, as many of you know, you've got very strict categories defined in the Quran as to whom you can give zakat to. So I'm going to ask this question to Brother Munir, our national manager. At NZF, what processes do we have to ensure that the zakah we collect actually goes to people who are eligible for zakah?
جزاك الله خير Brother Farouk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah, salatu salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah. Very good question. We go through, this set process that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prescribed for us as Muslims in the Quran, in Surah Tawbah, ayah number 60, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the 8 categories clearly. So we are aiming to distribute the zakat to these 8 categories. How we do it, we have, alhamdulillah, set of process to make sure we give those who are eligible to receive zakat, and we don't give for those who are not eligible to receive zakat. So alhamdulillah, we do have case workers, intake officers, case workers, properly trained and qualified case workers, where they look after the process. This is very important because people, they might think we don't have needy people here. I will answer that question inshallah later on as well. But alhamdulillah, we have a very high level process in place where we make sure all the zakat are distributed according to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair.
Yeah.
A related question to that, and I guess you mentioned we've got a well-defined process around assessing eligibility for zakah, but I guess that can kind of be a double-edged sword, where some people may think it's too much process, or NZF's being very difficult and they don't help. And every now and then we see the odd comment coming up on social media as well, saying NZF didn't assist somebody, right? Brother Ismail, I know you've taken a lot of these questions over the years. Could you sort of shed some light on, why people complain about NZF not assisting people?
Yes, the first thing I'd like to say is that as an NZF, we are open and transparent, so we are ready for feedback. We are ready to admit if we've done something wrong, so we don't mind if people send us a feedback or a complaint, so to speak, for us to look at how we can improve. And if we got it wrong, we need to fix it and we should fix it. But having said that, most of the, almost every single complaint or so to the keyboard warriors, as I call them, who have a go at us on Facebook, and you'll notice that we normally don't respond. And as Muslims, our duty is, Allah instructs us in the Quran, that when you hear some news or you have something, you have to, before you distribute it or tell others, you need to verify the story. So people are actually committing a sin by just going out there and saying that we've done this or we've done that, and accusing us of not using the zakat properly. We are ready to show all the processes. Now, an example is that sometimes people think, they say we didn't help somebody because they were eligible. Now, we may have made a mistake and not helped them, and we were meant to. Yes, we're ready to rectify that and bring it to our attention at any time. You can call me, you can email us. But to just give you two examples, it happened just in the last 2 weeks, where family members or friends of ours that we know would say, look, I've referred this person to NZF, and you guys kind of rejected their claim, but we know 100% that they are Zakat eligible. And, I said, no problem, got the details, went on the case file, looked at it, all the details, reviewed it, double checked it with the national manager, made sure that we've got everything correct. And then to make a long story short, both those cases, turns out that those people weren't actually Zakat eligible, but to their friends and family that was accusing us of rejecting them, it appears that way, and they don't see the full story, or they're not able to do the full assessment. Now, in both those cases, those friends and families have actually personally distributed Zakat money to those particular recipients. And in a nutshell, they have given somebody Zakat that's not eligible for Zakat. And without giving the names and the details, I explained that. And that's when the problem comes, when people believe they can do individual assessments. Now, I'm not saying it will always be that. There will be times when we get it wrong. And yes, please let us know.
There's a couple of questions that I think came out of the last two discussions that I can relate to in terms of questions asked. One is around, how do we ensure that our caseworkers are trained? And I'll come to Sister Angela in a sec. But I also wanted to just touch on, the point that you made, because there was a question around, there was a recent post by a sheikh, without naming names, that got me thinking about NZF Australia. I hope you're able to answer his general comments, particularly around one, his recommendation to give directly to people in the cash form. Two, is NZF in the fee sabilillah category? I didn't think so, but what would be good to hear your clarification on it. Three, does NZF have a supervisory Sharia board? And four, does NZF provide relief in cash forms? So I guess to generalize, the person asking, there are certain people out there who recommend giving direct cash to people. And like Brother Ismail said, taking on the responsibility of assessing eligibility yourself versus giving it to an organization like NZF. Brother Munir, from a national sort of, from a Sharia point of view, can you talk about one, how does NZF give out Zakat? Does it give out in the cash form or not? Two, do we have a supervisory Sharia board? And three, is NZF in the fee sabilillah category?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. I think we're not fi sabilillah. We're not a da'wah organization. As you can see, we are a service organization, and we are committed to deliver Zakat service from basically from payers and recipients. So we are the middle part, but we added process in there so that we make sure the Zakat are going to the right people. In regards to the Sharia Board, alhamdulillah, as mentioned before, we have proper system in place where, alhamdulillah, we have caseworkers who does all the process. Alhamdulillah, we have team leaders where they look after each case that's approved or rejected. And so it comes to national manager where I verify the information, I endorse, or I ask for revision. If things are not really easy, sometimes you would find a very complex cases that we're not able to answer, or we're not able to fund, or we don't have the understanding of to what extent that case could be hard. So what we do, alhamdulillah, I always talk to Brother Ismail, and I drag his attention to the case to see what's the best solution for this. And if we are not agree, and we do that with three of us, Ismail, Asif, and myself, if we can't find the right solution, then alhamdulillah, we pass it to the Sharia Board, which included Sheikh Bilal Ismail from South Africa. He's part of Mercy Mission. Sheikh Sajid Umar, where I always communicate with them on a, if not daily, at least weekly, and I take them through cases so that they can give us their advice. Same thing with Sheikh Tawfiq. Alhamdulillah, we have Sheikh Abu Adnan and Sheikh Abu Bakr Zawud from Sydney. So Alhamdulillah, I also contact the Board of Imams here in Victoria, Sheikh Mustafa, to verify, and I run through them before we actually deny or take any decisions. And these are in the complex cases that we are in doubt. So Alhamdulillah, there is a Sharia board. There are all these mashayikh are qualified, graduate from reputable universities. So Alhamdulillah, we don't just guess. There's no guessing game here. Everything's running according to what Allah Subhanahu wa Taala prescribed in the Quran. We can make mistakes. SubhanAllah, we are human beings. No one is free of mistakes, but we are happy to revise case, and this is the case, to be honest. Some people, when they're not happy with the outcomes, they actually send emails, call us, and we revise the case and again, and we do shura about the case, and we send it to the board so that they can give us their opinion from Sharia perspective. So Alhamdulillah, as you can see, everything is really running the way it should be. So yeah, this is my answer for the question, Brother Farooq.
Jazakallah khair. I'll come back to the distribution question in a sec to Brother Asif. But before that, we've been talking a lot about process and assessment and eligibility and so on. So moving on to Sister Angela, there's questions around how do we train people? Like when we get people on board, what's our process to ensure that the team's following all of these processes?
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. First of all, I think going back to our obligation as Zakat workers, it's very important to note that all case workers actually in NZF are trained thoroughly, and we also facilitate regular weekly Zakat workshops. Now, this is obligatory for all NZF team members. And these are very interactive workshops, and it's an excellent source of knowledge for all of us. Even myself, like I've been here for 4 years, so subhanAllah, and I learn something new every time. Well, not something, quite a lot of new things every time I attend these workshops. And as well as these workshops, where we all get together and we share knowledge and we learn new information, we also have weekly team meetings. Now, these are casework meetings with the caseworkers. So they actually get to discuss there's an opportunity for them to discuss their casework with us and with the management, where they can discuss openly if there's something that's concerning them. If there's a difficult case, they are welcome to bring it forward. So basically, it's a very open communication system which we have in place, and it's really good. And we make sure that all caseworkers are on the same platform. And also, in saying that, I'd like to also mention that we also encourage staff PD training. I won't go too much into that because we're still working closely at developing it further, but this will be a benefit. This will definitely benefit all our team members, inshallah, in the future.
So let's catch the other distribution question that was part of the previous question, which is, will NZF be providing relief in cash forms? But to generalize, there's another question that I want to direct to Brother Asif, which is, I don't see NZF doing a lot of food distribution per se, but we talk about people being in need and not being able to afford food. So Brother Asif, could you shed some light on, how do we do distribution and what forms do we typically do distribution? You're on mute, Brother Asif. Let me unmute you. Yeah.
Thank you. Jazakallah khairan, Farooq, for that question. So, do we? Why don't we do food distribution? It's related, I suppose, to your earlier question about cash. The ideal form of distributing zakat is in the form of cash. That is the ideal, to actually make the recipient the owner of the fund, and that they can then make that decision themselves on what is the best use of that money in their circumstance. So that's the ideal. We strive for that. We try to, as much as we can, give cash as much as we can, but we also have restrictions. We have, local legislation we need to adhere to. We have reporting right requirements, etc. So hence, we then tend to also distribute zakat in the form of a service. So, if people need help with rental, we'll pay the rent. If people need help with transport, we'll help them with transport, and so on. That's not the ideal. Now, in terms of food distribution, again, it's for a zakat organization. We don't see it's our area to start buying lots of food, storing and distributing as needed. There are other organizations that do that, and as a strategy, what we try to do at NZF as much as we can is stay in the space of zakat, in the space of finance, collecting funding, and facilitating other organizations. So there are specialist organizations out there who have expertise in sourcing food, bulk items, packaging them, repackaging them, have the logistics to distribute them, far and wide, or have people come to a center. So rather than duplicate that process, we tend to partner with those kind of organizations where it's relevant, and provide them the funding to provide a service. An example was, during the bushfire season, there were a lot of organizations who had expertise in and contacts within the rural areas. Rather than us going and replicating all of that, we partnered with specialists who knew the situation on the ground, and we had the funds. And as long as it met zakat eligibility criteria, we funded those organizations, much like what we're doing now in the COVID emergency. We're giving a lot of cash assistance to people, but there are certain people, cash assistance is not the ideal. They can't go out to get food, and there are organizations like Aussie Muslims, we are partnering with them, who are specializing in sourcing good quality food, good quality essential items, packaging them, and they've got a network of volunteers who are then distributing those essential items out there. So we see we are best placed to leverage off that rather than replicate that. So that's in a nutshell why we don't do this. We try to leverage off other service providers and get those service providers to improve their service, build their capacity. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I want to talk about food vouchers because that's another question, but the point that you mentioned leads me to another question that was asked. I'm just going to read that question out. Yeah. Over the past few years, I have directed my Zakat al-Mal to NZF, but recently there are many Islamic charity organizations in Australia, all reaching out to the community for Zakat and Sadaqah donations. This adds unnecessary confusion to the average Muslim as to which organization they should direct their Zakat and Sadaqah to. And I can't but think of the wasted resources because of the redundancies that this is creating in running all of these independent organizations. Does it have to be this way? Moving forward, can there be collaboration between organizations? And I know, Brother Ismail, you're really passionate about collaboration. So just extending on from what Brother Asif said, Brother Ismail, could you speak a bit about, not just recently, but since 2013, NZF's position on how we want to work with other organizations in the community?
Yes, fundamentally, we know that we can't do this on our own, and we don't pretend and try to. Since 2013, we have been working and trying our hardest to collaborate with different organizations and trying working parties. So we have some MOUs, memorandum of understanding on agreements with organizations. We've got one with Islamic Council Victoria. We've got one with the Brothers in Need. We have, that's active ones. We've had quite a few with other organizations, but more recently, and as you know, like as in any sector, there's a lot of politics and people trying, everybody's just, like every second day there's a new charity starting up. This is the hardest part for us here because, especially in Australia, everybody always thinks they can do something better than the other person. So, well, I don't trust those guys, I'll do my own thing. We in NZF, we're trying to say, guys, give us a chance, come and talk to us. Let's do this together. And let's stop this WhatsApp, Facebook collections. Now, recently, just when the pandemic of COVID-19 started, Brother Asif, to his credit, had a brilliant idea. He said, look, here's our chance to, to get this off the ground. He approached one of the major charities, said, look, let's get together and work together with different organizations. So we went to ANIC and asked ANIC to help us with establishing a collaboration of charities. Now, alhamdulillah, long story short, after a while, we managed to get 5 of us together: Islamic Relief, Penny Appeal, National Zakat Foundation, Muslims Around the World, and Oz Relief. And we've established an organization called, or a collaboration called MRG, Muslims Response Group. And we've launched a website, and there's lots of services provided through that with the 5 charities supporting and underpinning that particular initiative. The idea with that is to any future thing that happens in Australia, such as bushfires, Christchurch is an example, though it was in New Zealand. For those who know bushfires, every second organization went to the bush and doubled up. Christchurch, every second organization was in Christchurch, doubled up. So we're trying to leverage the cost, the finances of those who donate to those charities, so we can make it more efficient. So yes, we are passionate about collaboration and reducing duplication and waste.
I think the MRG is probably the first step in that direction. Mashallah, I'm trying to get some of the biggest charities under one umbrella, and it's kicked off, and it's one of those blessings from Allah as part of COVID-19, I guess. Alhamdulillah. You mentioned people doing WhatsApp messages and so on to try and raise money when you've got organizations, etc. And there's a question that I'd like to direct to Brother Asif, because I know he's quite passionate about protecting the dignity of the people we assist. The question that's come up is, how come NZF doesn't do fundraisers for specific people? Brother Asif, if you can answer that.
Look, we are, as our name suggests, National Zakat Foundation. We are focused on the pillar of zakat and establishing that pillar. Zakat as a system is there for us to pool our resources into a single bucket, ideally. So, and as zakat by its nature, we pay once a year. Generally, 80%, 90%, I would even say, you probably know better, pay zakat in Ramadan. Although we don't have to pay it in Ramadan, we can pay it whenever we want, as long as it's consistent at that time. So our attitude is that we should not be focused on constant fundraisers. If we look at the zakat pool, we estimate at least Australians pay at least $20–30 million of zakat a year. There's probably a lot more unpaid beyond that as well. So we focus on zakat, that we establish it as it's supposed to be established. And once we have established it or starting to establish, and we have that pool of funds, then during times of emergencies, unless it's an exceptional situation, we should not burden the community on constant fundraisers if we've got our money together. And that's what we've been able to do. We get we get requests, or all kinds of requests. An example, I'll give you an example. Last week we got a request. A community member of ours passed away. He had no family in Australia, and he had actually passed away 2 weeks prior, and went undetected in his apartment. Eventually, police were called, and they were, once they were alerted, they understood him to be from a specific community. When they reached out to that community, they lucky, somebody knew about us, and they approached us about, can we help pay for the funeral? Now, typically, if you had to raise, $5,000-$10,000, we would all be passing the, proverbial hat round to collect funds. But because we've collected our zakat, throughout the year from the community, we were able to assist without having to go around the community, spend time running, doing campaign fundraisers, etc., for this particular case. And we were able to very quietly assist the community that had the burden of burying this person, without them having to then go around asking for funding. And they've realized, that the advantage and the need of a pool like this, where $10,000 can be easily facilitated without resorting to people taking out loans, people asking each other, and then advertising somebody's need, etc. So hence, if we focus specifically on zakat, and if we say we collect that, and if we think about it, 20-30 million, that's a huge amount of money that we can and should be able to assist our community and the wider community as well with that type of money. So that's why we focus on zakat, collecting zakat when it's due, and then absolutely ensuring that the recipients are receiving that and not sitting on that money, because that's another problem is, we could be sitting on this money endlessly, and to that effect, we distribute on average $150,000 a month across Australia. So we ensure that we're not sitting on a pool of money, not assisting anybody in the community.
So, Jazakallah khair for that. I mean, that's subhanAllah, the fact that we have Muslims among our community who are passing away and no one knows about them. That's something we make dua to Allah that it keeps our community strong, knit, right, and connected. So just to pass on to Sister Angela, or actually, let me ask a question to Brother Munir. There's a question around, we read a few case studies that come up on social media, but can you tell us about some of the biggest challenges that the team has faced in cases? So maybe a couple of examples, Brother Munir, in terms of challenging cases for the teams had to handle.
I think every case is a challenge case, to be honest. Seeing a person, humbling themselves, asking for money, it is not the best situation. So that's why I said every case is a very challenge case. But of course, when there is, health issues, security issue beside the financial issue, is really, something that affects each and every person who is dealing with this kind of case. To give you an example, we had a case where, subhanAllah, a sister who is married to a brother here. They used to study together. They all from a certain same country. They met each other here in the university. They got married. Then subhanAllah, they like each other before the marriage, and they were doing really well. After that, she fell pregnant after the marriage. Subhanallah, then the brother started changing his the way he deal with her, and the way he treats her. And I mean, she couldn't go to university, of course, after her pregnancy, and subhanallah, unfortunately, he was the breadwinner, so he started telling her not to go outside, not to go visit the friends, not to talk to anyone. Basically, she was just locked down in her house, and he used to travel a lot. Subhanallah. Then she was told by her friend to actually apply for food, because the husband, he provides little so that she can just survive, subhanallah. And then she gave birth, and when the sister came to the office, it was a big challenge. Why I'm saying that? Because the caseworkers, they can see scratches and injuries in the baby's body. And when they ask what's going on, she doesn't want to talk. But we knew there was something going on. Then we had a quick shura to find out there is something wrong. We can see she was sad, and from what she was telling, if you're married, they were international students, of course, and you have a husband, what's going on? Like, why you are in need if he's working? And finally, her friend told us that she's going through a tough time, and the husband, subhanallah, he comes and he start throwing things, and sometimes he use stick, sometimes he would grab the child and throw it. Literally, that's what the sister said, and the child would cry, and he doesn't even care. I've seen how hard this case was for the caseworkers here in the office. Then we decided basically to call the police, and we said he can't go to the house. Unfortunately, he wasn't in the house, but we gave her, a chance, to call the police upon that abusive husband, or we go in to call the police. So alhamdulillah, after she went back home, she stayed with her friend, and she decided to call the police, and we gave her 2 days. Otherwise, seeing that this is taking place, and seeing that her friend is telling us that, we couldn't hold ourselves back to call the police. Alhamdulillah, then we found out second day she was managed to call the police, and though he wasn't at home, so the police start searching for him, because he travels a lot. Allahu a'lam where he goes. The wife, she doesn't know. So alhamdulillah, we were able to help her to get her own accommodation with some food supply and medications, so that inshallah, and we referred her to other service organizations so that they can start taking care of her, inshallah. Alhamdulillah. So this is one of the hardest cases that we've seen, and there are a lot. We had another one.
Just interrupt you there. Sorry, Brother Munir, but I just want to address a few questions that have been asked that I think relate directly to some of the points that you just made. And I want to ask Brother Ismail this, because I know ever since NZF started, I mean, that's one example, right, Brother Munir? But we see many, many examples, as you said, every single day. And one of the challenges has obviously been, how do we staff up? How do we ensure we have people there to assess these cases? And one of the questions that's come up is, does NZF have full-time staff? Are they paid? What are the salaries of the caseworkers, management? Is it full-time, part-time? Do you just want to shed some light on that, Brother Ismail? How do we manage that at NZF? And I also want to then go to Sister Angela to talk about some of the other points that Munir mentioned, which is around how do people deal with complex cases from a mental well-being perspective. But Brother Ismail, if you can tell us about, how do we construct our workforce, I guess, and then we'll move on to how do we, support our people.
Alhamdulillah, so NZF, or the Australian Muslim community, has matured quite a bit in the last 7 years, because when we started in 2013, we were running basically on a volunteer basis, and that's what the expectation is from the Muslim community, that every charity or every dawah or every mosque should run on a volunteer basis, and no sheikh should be paid, or you shouldn't pay for Quran classes, that kind of mentality. But I haven't seen that in the last few years, which is great. So we started NZF 2013. We were running on a volunteer environment for about 2 to 3 years. And as the cases grew, it was becoming very, very hard to keep volunteers, keep people trained. And we started paying some allowances. But 2 or 3 years ago, the board said, look, as we were growing, the amount of cases we were getting was just increasing the amount of money that we need to distribute. And then the board gave us permission to start looking at paying the staff. So we've got volunteers, we've got part-time staff. So they full-time, but we have about 20 full-time staff, but it's about 10 FTEs across, so which means people work on different hours, different days. And Sister Angela can touch us on also, we have an pay according to a particular award. We have got admin staff, we've got staff on answering the phones, and then we've got caseworkers, we've got senior caseworkers, etc. So we pay according to the different awards to make sure that we don't underpay people. We also make sure that, and Sister Angela makes 100% sure of that if there's any increase in any of those awards, that it gets passed through. So, and for the last 7 years in the management space, everybody's basically on the same. There's no structure of management pay and non-management pay, because all of the management roles was done on a voluntary basis. Myself, Brother Asif, Brother Firaz, Brother Faris, all of us has been doing this. And I've been the CEO on a voluntary basis for the last 7 years. The board then, in the last board meeting this year, and just the mercy of Allah, said that, we can't continue like this, because you can't run a ship without a captain being there. So they've requested that this year we needed to bring a full-time CEO on board, and they've asked me to come on. And it was just timely that I came on in the beginning of March. It wasn't planned that it was with COVID, but alhamdulillah. I've come on as the full-time CEO. I'm an IT professional. I left that particular function and role to come on to see whether it will make a difference if we're on full-time. So this Ramadan, the next 3 to 6 months, the assessment will be made. And the assessment will be made on whether this function is viable financially. I have certain KPIs that I need to look at, meaning that has it improved the way the staff works? Has it improved processes? Has it improved the reach of NZF, etc., etc., and also put into place some sustainability options, meaning that we can all, and we are, alhamdulillah, we've been fortunate that over the last 7 years, all our salaries have been paid from sadaqah, and we haven't had to dig into any of the zakat. People often ask that, and one of my goals and KPIs to make sure that to continue this is to build some sustainability models into NZF. The question that the person asked, senior management and big chiefs, no, we don't have that within NZF. Sister Angela, I'd like you to touch on how we work, about the HR part, and how we use employee shore and the award system to make sure that because we get audited through the tax department, ACNCC, so we have to make sure everything is above board.
Yes, subhanAllah. Yeah, I came on obviously because the National Zakat Foundation has been growing in Australia, and there's a need obviously to look at our staff and make sure that we are doing the right thing. We're under the social and community social award. So basically under that award, that's where most of our staff are based. And with NZF, it's quite unique because we actually have predominantly part-time employees. So there's something that I've had to work very closely with the staff to make sure that they're motivated, they're happy with their job, because it's very easy to lose a staff member to another role outside where there's full-time work available. But the way we work seems to function really well, and I think taking into mind that, of course, we will always have certain hurdles, but I've noticed that over time, our team seems to be strengthening. We seem to have a very good team, subhanAllah, and part-time, like I said, majority, even our team leads are part-time staff members. But the fact that we have this open communication structure with all staff members, that they can reach out to anybody when there's a problem, they can reach out to me, they can reach out to Brother Ishmael, and it makes them feel that they are part of a family. I would say more like a family environment, and they've always come back to me and said that that makes them feel that yes, they're important and they're part of an organization which really care for them. And subhanAllah, that's, I think, means a lot to us. And yeah, sorry, basically, yeah, that's I feel that I think we have definitely accomplished something as an organization, starting off on a very small volunteer base, but now we've definitely expanded into something a lot bigger.
Brother Ismail and Sister Angela. But Ismail, you touched on one point, which is also other questions. The question was, do you get audited? Do you need to submit a financial report annually to the government? I'm going to direct that to Brother Asif, because he's the one who's managing, I guess all of your systems to make sure we can satisfy any audit requirements. Brother Asif, can you just touch on, what audits are we required to do?
Yes, sure. Look, we, as part of our ACNC obligations, we are part of the Australian Charity Commission. We are recognized by them and audited by them, but we also have obligations under the ATO arrangements that we have, where we have DGR status, so we have tax deductibility, and that also brings with it certain responsibilities, reporting requirements as well. And then we also have obligations at the community level. We are collecting community funds, so we have obligation to report on that. So taking all of that together, and as we are growing, so one other thing, as we are growing, we are now classed a large NGO, and when you're a large NGO, you have in some of the reporting criteria are no longer voluntary but are mandatory. So having audited accounts, annual audit accounts are mandatory for us for the size of organization we are. So to be able to manage and report on the funds that we collect, on average, we're about a $5 million organization. What I mean by that is, we turn over around $5 million, both zakat and sadaqah. So this is operational costs and our actual distributions. So to manage all of that, to be able to report on that, to be able to report in the detail that we do, we need to have systems, and we have our systems in place, where we can pretty much track every cent of zakat that's given to us, where it's at and where it's gone to. So at any one time, or we can give an account of every dollar of zakat, where it went, who did it go, who were the recipients. We have a full paper trail. So from an audit perspective, we collect, we have confidentiality, privacy agreements that we adhere to, and under those principles, we collect client information, their financial records. We keep that, we assess that. So we have systems that hold that securely. And then when it comes to auditing, we once a year we have external auditors coming into NZF, and they will go through randomly any part of the organization's operations. So, as an example, last year they wanted to know what fraud detection policies and procedures we have in place, such that people are not how do you safeguard employees falsely distributing money to themselves, to their friends and family, etc. And we had to prove how that happens. We have, and I think Munir touched on that right at the beginning. We have multiple layers of delegations. We have multiple checks and balances. So no two people, that work together can authorize something. So we've got a suite of processes to ensure there's no fraudulent behavior. They will randomly ask us any particular, and in any one year we may have over 500,000 transactions. We sometimes distribute anything as little as $10 to as much as $10,000, and they will ask us to account for any one of those 500,000 transactions we on average do through NZF. So we have to ensure we have a paper trail that if they want to, they can even call the client and say, did you receive this money? So we have that. So those are some of the operational activities we have to support some of the reporting requirements, some of the mandatory reporting requirements we have for the government. As far as the community goes, we ensure every month we account for the money that we have distributed. How much have we distributed? How many cases have we distributed to? What kind of things within the bounds of privacy? We ensure that every month this data is released. We class ourselves as a public institution, hence anybody who has any concern about any aspect of the running of NZF, we happily invite anybody to come in and look at this themselves. Now, of course, it's not practicable for the whole community to come in and audit us. So what we do is we do self-auditing. We do things that we are not required to do. So one of the things we do on a regular basis, on a quarterly basis, Ismail, myself, and Munir, we present ourselves to the Board of Imams, the Australian National Imams Council, the president there. We will go through that quarter's accounts. We don't have to do that. There's no obligation on us to do that, but we do that because the Imams are representative of their communities. So we see that if we can show to the Imams the way we work, what we've done, and if we've made a mistake, we'll admit to it and we'll improve ourselves. So we're not afraid to show if we've made mistakes. But the more important thing is we've trained ourselves and we've trained all of our staff that everything that we do potentially is visible to anybody in the community. So we do that with ANIC, and we take them through whatever they want to say. If they want to look at specific transactions, we're happy to look at them, show them. So those are some of the activities and some of the processes we put in place to report to government that we have to, but more importantly than government, report to our donors, our Zakat payers who have entrusted their Zakat to us, that they understand that, look, not only do we have a thorough accounting system, managing system of how we manage the money, but I hope through what Munir and Angela have said, we have systems training, we train our staff. We've got processes in place that people are being assessed, applications are going through a due process, there's delegations, and then there's systems to account for that money, and there's efficiencies as well. And then the overall oversight Ismail does. Yeah.
Awesome. Conscious we're running short of time and there's a few more questions, but I'm going to take the question that Brother Fayaz Sheikh just asked us on Zoom. And Munir, maybe you can answer this. Assalamu alaikum, brothers. How are orphan kids helped through NZF? Is there some kind of recording of Muslim orphan kids or refugees in Australia, I'm guessing?
That's a very good question. I think if you are following our marketing or announcements that we make, I think last year we tried to be part of the orphan project as an independent project. So we are working on it, if you are asking about that. But individuals, yes, we support a lot of families who have orphans with them, who are carers. So alhamdulillah, we had recently in Melbourne where an orphan is settled with a family, so we needed to support that family with everything that orphan needs, alhamdulillah. We had recent case in Sydney just last week. We put ourselves there to actually have an ongoing support to that orphan brother, so that they don't feel they're abandoned. So alhamdulillah, yes, cases come every now and then, and we do our best. We do our best to make sure they don't really feel that they don't have family, alhamdulillah, because we always remember the hadith of Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ana wa kafil al-yatim kahatain fil jannah, myself and the one who is the sponsor of an orphan we are like this in Jannah. And he actually pointed his two fingers, which is subhanallah, great reward. So we really take care of orphans. In fact, we're trying to do something about it, because our work is just to focus on the zakat. As I've mentioned, this is our core business, but we are working with others, inshallah, to make sure they are looked after. Every orphan Muslim is looked after, and inshallah, make dua, inshallah, Brother Fayaz. We're trying our best to establish a project, inshallah, that will take care of orphans, bidnillah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So just to touch on that, Brother Munir, in Australia, they normally refer to, besides the orphans, there's also the foster care program, where they take children that they're not necessarily orphans, but they're in either in a violent situation, or they're in danger, or they're being neglected. So NZF is very, very active right now in Victoria and New South Wales in establishing or working with other NGOs in getting involved in the foster care program, because there are a lot of Muslim children in non-Muslim foster care homes. As a foster care parent myself, I know how important it is to have children that is out of troublesome homes that we can help. So NZF is working on a range of welfare issues that affects the community, and that's why the pillar of Zakat is to establish all of that. And just a question that come from Facebook, that the person is asking, can we give our zakat to our family? So it's relating to two things. Yes, you can give your zakat to your family, but you can't give zakat to those that you're already responsible for, such as your own children or your wife or your parents. And sometimes many people do this. And once again, we need to stress from what we said in the beginning. When you give your zakat, the obligation is, if you're giving it yourself, the obligation is you to make sure that the person you're giving it to is zakat eligible. So if you understand, you're knowledgeable on the assessment of zakat eligibility, and you have done your due diligence on making sure that the person is actually eligible, then yes, go ahead to do that. But the pillar of zakat is designed that it is done from a establishment perspective. So that means you actually fix the problem holistically, not year on year. You're giving the same money to the same people and you're never fixing the problem. So Jazakallah khair for that. I think we're running out of time. Farouk, do you have any more tough questions? Or?
There's one last question that I think is relevant, but it's an easy one. Probably for Munir. How do we give Zakat al-Fitr? Do we give it as money or food such as rice, dates, and so on? And let's make that our last question and we'll wrap up inshallah after this.
We give Zakat al-Fitr, I think, same thing how we give our Zakat al-Mal. Many people actually ask Brother Farouk, and you guys should give food. In fact, we are giving food. We don't really give other things. So what we do, alhamdulillah, we do work with our partner businesses where we give Zakat al-Fitr in a voucher format. So alhamdulillah, the clients, they go there, they buy food and things that they need. Alhamdulillah, they go and buy food, and they can't, and it's clearly mentioned that they can only get food through that voucher. So basically what they get in is paper, but they have to use it for food. So alhamdulillah, and it's been working really, really good. Why we do that, I think there is something called tamlik. When you are given someone, you can't just give them what you want. And we realized that, and we discussed that with a few other organizations in regards to the COVID-19, where, they put in everything in a box, just go and, deliver it to families. Sometimes there's the sugar, oil, things that the family don't need. It's going for waste, to be honest. So the idea is to give them dignity to go and buy what they want from, the businesses as everybody else. So alhamdulillah, this is how we give our Zakat al-Fitr.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair everyone for tuning in and listening and asking all the questions. I think the more questions we get is great, because it gives us an opportunity to answer them. So with that, let's wrap up. Brother Ismail, any final words before we close off for today?
Yeah, Jazakallah khairan to everybody, and for those who asked the questions, and please send us your questions, your feedback. As I said, we are here. We are accountable to Allah firstly, and we would love to hear if we're doing something wrong, if we can improve things. If you heard of a case that we didn't help and you're concerned and you believe that they needed to be helped, we need you to tell us. Don't just assume that NZF doesn't know what they're doing, or they're very discriminatory. We don't discriminate. We only go by Allah's rules, and we're ready to change things and improve things. You can reach out to me directly, email, phone, come to my home, whatever you need to do. We are accessible. Jazakallah khairan for taking the time to send your questions and listening to us. And we make dua that you continue to support us, especially in this last 3-4 days of Ramadan. The major night for everybody coming up tonight, inshallah, and tomorrow night for those who started on Saturday. May Allah accept all your du'as and keep us all sincere, and may we all end up in Jannatul Firdaus A'la.
Ameen.
Ameen.
Jazakallah khair everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Jazakallah khair wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.